Welcome back. Let's discuss security matters now. In recent weeks, Nigeria has witnessed a disturbing surge in violent attacks across several states, which has led to the loss of countless lives now and the destruction of properties, leaving communities in fear and despair. Multiple attacks have been reported in Borno, Yobe, Plateau, and Benue states. No fewer than 144 persons have been killed by suspected armed headers in the two north-central states of Plateau and Benue in the last 2 weeks, while scores of others sustained injuries with over 50 houses razed. Governors of both states, Hyacinth Alia and Caleb Mutwang, have raised alarm over the siege laid on their states now by these attackers. In Niger State, Governor Umar Bago has declared a dusk-to-dawn curfew in the capital, Minna, following incessant killings of people in the city. Attacks have been reported in Katsina and Zamfara states as well. In the southwestern region, Ondo State, Ondo State has witnessed its own series of attacks, with gunmen killing over 20 farmers in Akure North local government area. Amid all of this, a newly identified terrorist group known as Mahmuda has launched a series of deadly attacks across Kwara and Niger states, targeting vigilantes and civilians. Mahmuda has reportedly operated for over 5 years, originating from Mokwa in Niger state and occupying parts of Kainji Lake National Park. These recurring attacks and kidnappings have raised serious questions about the effectiveness of Nigeria's security strategy. In response, President Bola Tinubu has ordered a security outreach to the hotbeds of recent killings to restore peace to the areas affected by these mass killings and bomb attacks. And of course, as I've said, the president has ordered the security agencies to come up with a new strategy to deal with these resurging attacks. Joining me on the program right now to discuss more on this issue is Dr. Kabir Adamu, who is the Managing Director, Beacon Security Consulting and Intelligence Limited, a security and consulting firm based in Abuja, and that's where he joins us from. Doc, thank you very much for coming on the show, and good to have you here once again. Help us to understand what could be behind this resurgence we're seeing. I mean, we've seen attacks in Plateau, Benue, we've seen in Borno, of course, the governor also raised serious concerns there. What exactly is going on?
So good afternoon, DEJI, and it's a pleasure to be back here again. A lot is going on in the country at the moment, and I can group them under 4 major headings. Number 1 are political issues that are driving the insecurity. As you are very aware, the preparations, early preparations, I must say, for the 2027 elections have begun. And sadly, it is a fact in our country that politicians do use security and insecurity as a weapon, as a tool to exact or portray their interest. And so what happens is, during this period, unfortunately, what politicians would do is to engage non-state actors, sometimes criminal non-state actors, other times terrorist non-state actors, to influence outcome of certain activities. And so you see groups that are affiliated sometimes with religious bodies, with ethnic bodies, being more restive just around this period. It's simply because politicians who are sometimes behind them are involved in this. The other component is the identity-based conflict that exists in Nigeria in different locations. Now, identity-based conflicts are conflicts between groups that are trying to exact their identity, their culture, their religion, their interest in whatever form. And sometimes they use criminal means to exact that influence. And this is what we see happening in North Central, Northwest, and some parts of Northeastern Nigeria. Because the issue has not been addressed, over time it has now become an institutionalized criminality with reprisals one after the other. There are other aspects of this political subgrouping, but I'll stop here. The second one is the socioeconomic conditions, poverty, unemployment, name them, and several other socioeconomic indices have reached a peak in Nigeria. And so if you add the fact that we have a case of proliferation of small arms and light weapons, of drug addiction, of name them, porous borders, and all that, then you can understand why we're seeing the resurgence. The third element is the environmental factors, climate change, and our inability as a country to mitigate the effects of climate change is leading to increased farmer-herder violence. Desertification is an example in the northern part of the country. Then gully erosion is another example in the southeastern part of the country. All of this have an effect in the dynamics. It forces farmers to move from one part into another part. Then on the other hand, it forces herders to move southwards into other parts. And so naturally you see a friction between the two groups. And if you add it to the other factors I've mentioned earlier on, you now understand why we're seeing that resurgence. Then the third element is the failure of the state to exact itself in terms of the security provisioning that is supposed to address these issues. We have major security operations, and I don't want to restrict this to military operations. Yeah. For the military, they are spread across the 36 states of the Federation, but beyond them, you have other forms of security operations. But these operations that have not been accountable, they are not answerable to our democratic settings, and so we don't really understand the objectives of these security operations. Are they tied to our national security imperative? Are they rooted in our national interest? And so that failure, as it were, for the security apparatus to have grassroots component, as you move from the urban centers into the rural centers, you see a lot of criminal activities going on, a very thin security presence in those locations. So again, these factors and a few others are the reasons why we're seeing a resurgence.
Now, two critical aspects that I also want you to speak on the more is, for instance, you identified political factors behind some of these attacks, and that politicians, of course, could be behind it, and that's really appreciated, because you look, campaigns for the 2027 election is beginning way too early, just as you pointed out, and for some time we've had relative peace, if you like. I mean, you don't have this kind of attacks. And suddenly, when you have some kind of campaign activities now picking up, suddenly you're having these attacks. I'm just wondering. And you look at the pattern. You look at 2023, we saw that. You look at even 2019, we saw that, 2015. But why is this so? What do politicians, what capital are they making out of this?
So, as you very well know, DEJI, from the entire Fourth Republic, for the 20-something years that we've been in this Fourth Republic, security has remained a vital component of the political dynamics. So during elections, security is either used by the ruling party to maintain its dominance, to say, well, we've seen improvement in security. So voters and let us remain. Or the opposition party will now say, no, you failed. You've not done very well in security. Therefore, give leeway. And it is for this simple reason that a lot of politicians have realized that one way or the other, security can, serve their interest. And that's why, unfortunately, we're seeing this particular reason. And I think the fact that the president traveled for such a period, even though it's a working visit, but the reality is that his absence created some sort of vacuum. That too was exploited by politicians. The second aspect is that the National Assembly, that should have played oversight function, has been on recess during the period that the president traveled. Now, this is by no means a design by the government. It is just coincidental that it happened. Yeah. And I think nobody took notice of it, except the adversary, of course. They took notice of it and they played out their hand. So, point I'm making is that politics will remain and will continue to either serve the interest of politicians, in this instance, political interest, vis-a-vis improvement in security, or resurgence of insecurity as we've seen it in the last few weeks.
Let us go to the attacks we saw in Benue and of course, Plateau. In the Benue attack, something the police said, and it's, for me, quite a bit disturbing, that, look, the attacks happened in two communities. That's in a Ukum local government area, two communities, that these attacks happened simultaneously. So while the police was trying to quell one attack, they didn't know at the time that another attack was going on elsewhere. So by the time they got there, the attackers had fled, but by then they had, done the damage. Now, what does this say about, for instance, the number of security agents that we have, and then the difficulties they might be going through, considering the terrain also that, the terrain where some of these attacks happened?
I'm sorry to say, with all sense of responsibility, that these are excuses. We've all known that we've got difficult terrains. It's not today or after the attack that we would know that we have difficult terrains. What is very clear, DEJI, is that the Constitution, Section 14, subsection 2 of the Constitution, places the responsibility of security in our federal government and on the federal security agencies. And so when incidents like this happen, I'm not happy when I hear the type of excuses that I'm hearing at the moment. If we are doing the right thing, we should have had a public security system that understands our weaknesses and prevents the enemy from exploiting those weaknesses. As an example, the 36 state governors, I would urge them to do a simulation of an attack in each of their local governments. As a governor, you know the local governments you have, you know the villages you have. So ask, when you are giving out money to the security agencies, and I tell you every month, governors give out money to the security agencies.
Yes.
So tell them to simulate an incident in the remotest part of that state, and then see how long it takes that particular security agency to respond. If it takes them longer than 7 to 15 minutes, then you know that that's the vulnerability that can be exploited by these non-state armed groups. And this is exactly what happened in Benue and Plateau State. They exploited that vulnerability. They challenged the supremacy of the use of force by the state. They came on motorbikes, DEJI. I don't know how we have come to a state in our national existence where 50 gunmen or more on motorbikes will come to a village undetected, kill people, and then escape on those motorbikes undetected, and not one of them would have been killed. Those are excuses. We must correct that. We must, as a people, block those vulnerabilities and prevent these non-state actors from challenging the supremacy of use of force by the state, which is one of the principal elements of every sovereign state. If we allow non-state actors to continue challenging that supremacy of the use of force, then our existence as a nation, in fact, the indices of a failing state would have been almost achieved as far as Nigeria is concerned. So we must change that and stop non-state actors from exploiting those vulnerabilities.
So the president met with the security chiefs and then ordered them to come up with a new strategy, give them some directive. If you were talking, for you, what kind of strategy would you expect the security agencies to begin to adopt now? Because obviously, whatever strategy they had been applying may have its own limitations. They've actually worked, no doubt, but then there might be some limitations, and there just might be a need for a renewed strategy, if you like. So what kind of strategy would you be expecting them to start working on at this time?
So they gave us an indication of what the president wants, and that's that he wants them to reach out to the subnationals, the governors, and probably the chairman. Then the next day, I think the governors also had their meeting, and one of the outcomes of that meeting is that they want to embrace technology. Now, all of that is good, but I must urge us as a people to take a step back and evaluate where we are. We have a national counterterrorism strategy, DEJI. That document is due for renewal, and this is the opportunity for us to renew it. Let's turn this public sentiment that is quite high at the moment. Everybody is talking about insecurity, and we can turn it to our advantage. We can come together as a people to embrace this challenge that we have and address it so that we now become more resilient. We have a common enemy, and that is the groups that are killing us. And I'm worried about three things, DEJI. First off, the narrative that is coming out suggesting, for instance, that a particular ethnic group is behind the killings, that is wrong. The people killing us are criminals. They are not killing us because they belong to a particular ethnic group. If we make the mistake of focusing on, quote unquote, a particular ethnic group, the enemy will be laughing at us, because I can bet you that the enemy cuts across religious divides, the enemy cuts across ethnic divides, and the earlier we realize that and focus on the act of criminality and not ethnicity, then the better for us. So number one strategy is to dispel this notion of narratives that are rooted in falseness and that are rooted in bias and that are essentially driven by the identity-based conflict that I referred to. Number one, we must, as a people, rekindle our national powers, and our national powers are rooted in our unity. As politicians, that is the first thing the state should be able to do. Dispel this notion of division that has crept in and that is now asking certain communities to defend themselves against the perceived common enemy. Meanwhile, the perceived common enemy is also an enemy. I don't know if you have seen the release by the Mieti Allah Cattle Breeders Association, where they indicated that they are being killed. They actually provided numbers of the persons. So on the one hand, one group feels they are behind the killings, while they themselves are also thinking that someone is targeting them. So this is what we must change. As a people, we have to come together. So that's number one strategy, rekindle our national unity as a people so that we avoid these divisions that is creeping on. Number two, even though I'm a bit uncomfortable about the nature of the ad hoc meeting that the president had, I would have wished DEJI that it was a National Security Council meeting, so that the apparatus of the state, the National Security Council meeting has an administrative mechanism, and that administrative mechanism would have taken up the decision by the president. But given that this is what happened, it was an ad hoc meeting, I'm urging the administrative machinery around Mr. President. That means the presidency, the office of the secretary to the government of the federation, to pick up that directive. The president said enough is enough. Now they should pick up that statement and turn it into an administrative tool, and then send out tasking orders and directives to the various MDAs, 27 of them, DG, that are within the security sector. Send out clear directives to each and every one of them, telling them what they want, and then develop achievable project management tools in terms of key performance indicators. So if it's the military as an example, and the directive is to kill the commanders of this group or arrest them, let it be measurable. Let the directive be done in such a clear term that within a month, within 2 months, it can be revisited to say this is the progress that has been made. If it's to the immigration or to customs or to the police, let it be the same thing. And then, of course, the coordinating elements within the national security architecture, the Office of the National Security Advisor, the Ministers of Defense, Police Affairs, and Interior, they also should take those administrative tools that will be issued to them into now measurable objectives that they can now push out to the various agencies under them, so that within a period, we can now look back and say, this presidential directive, this is what it has been able to result to. DEJI, if we don't do this, I'm sorry to say, this is not the first time presidential directives have been issued, and we didn't see much turnout. So except we change strategy and do what I'm suggesting, we may go down that drain again. Number three is the role of the governors. The governors have a key role to play. They have to establish the structure and the platform for addressing security. You are in Lagos, and I'll urge you to have an opportunity to talk to the governor of Lagos State. Let him explain to you the security architecture he has in that state. I'm advocating that other governors should copy what Lagos has, at least for a start. All public security architecture should have 6 elements. Those 6 elements, to a larger extent, exist in Lagos. Now, it is not 100% effective in Lagos, but at least it's better than any other state I've seen in the country. So governors should, at the next meeting, ask their peer, the governor of Lagos, to present to them in a clear manner what he has been able to establish. And I'm happy as a consultant to support that process, so that at the end of the day, they can have a security architecture in their state that will support the federal architecture that we already have. And then number 4 is the role of the National Assembly in oversight function. Everything I've said before now falls under the executive arm. But since we're practicing a democratic system, the role of the legislator is to oversight where there are failures, and we admit that there are monumental failures in security. That oversight function should be exercised so that we put pressure on the executive arm to perform adequately. And then, of course, the last element I would like to mention is our role as civil society activists, as citizens. We must continue to demand for accountability in a lawful manner. I'm not advocating for anything unlawful. All I'm saying, we should speak up through this type of engagement on the media, through postings that we do in lawful manner, asking for accountability. And what's that accountability? Let's see a reduction in the insecurity dynamics in the country.
Okay. Now let's look at this new group that has sprung up, the one that has been carrying out attacks in Niger and Kwara State, Mahmuda. What exactly do you know about the group? And tell us more about it.
So it's not exactly a new group. The leader is the person named Mahmuda. It's one of the groups that is affiliated with the Islamic State in West Africa province. And there are several small groups like that are affiliated with the larger Islamic State, either the ISGS, which is one of the groups in the Sahel region, or ISWAP, or that's Islamic State in West Africa province. There are others that are affiliated with Al-Qaeda, but this particular one, we believe, is affiliated with the Islamic State. Now, in addition to its existence in those locations, it came, like they would usually do, in the name of proselytization, preaching their version of Islam. And because there was an absence of state institution, as it were, they were allowed to continue their preaching. Now, over time, they continue to exact their influence in terms of what they believe is their version of Islam. And then gradually, they started becoming radicalized. And then, of course, started having issues with the leadership structure in that local government in both Niger and Kwara State. And then, of course, there were military operations starting from around January into March this year, where even the leader, the Mahmuda person at the moment, we don't know where he is. He could have been killed in that military operation, or he could have been injured. But this is the pattern that we're seeing in that region, where groups like that emerge. Then they would have military operations, and then they would sometimes move out. But then at the moment, there are several smaller groups like that, including this Mahmuda group at the Kayenji National Park. Because, of course, it's a forested part of the state that cuts across there into Benin Republic. And so every time they're chased, all they do is they enter that park. And when the military goes into the park, they can easily move into Benin Republic. And so that's where we are at the moment, sadly.
Well, Kabir Adamu, thank you very much for your time. And thanks for coming on the program. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Well, that's how much we can take on the program this week. I'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.